Jack the Ripper, a tale of mystery. The heavy fog rolled through the narrow cobble streets of Whitechapel, wrapping the neighborhood in a shroud of mystery and despair. Gas lamps flickered weakly against the oppressive darkness, casting elongated shadows that danced ominously along the walls of dilapidated tenements. It was the autumn of 1888, and the air was thick with the scent of coal, smoke, and decay, a reminder of the poverty that gripped this corner of London. Yet, beneath the mundane hardships of daily life, a far more sinister presence lurked, the elusive figure known only as Jack the Ripper. As the clock struck midnight, a haunting wail echoed through the alleys, barely audible above the din of the city. It was a sound that had become all too familiar, a cry of anguish resonating from the hearts of women who walked these streets, forced by circumstance into the shadows. Among them was Marian Nichols, a woman whose life had been marked by tragedy and despair, now destined to become the first of the Ripper's victims. In a small, cluttered office, a young journalist named Thomas Gray pored over the latest reports. His heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. This was not merely a story to him. It was a chance to uncover the truth behind the terror that gripped London. Thomas had always been drawn to mysteries, but this one was different. The Ripper was a monster hiding in plain sight, and he had made it his mission to expose the truth, no matter the cost. As he set his pen to paper, the ink flowed like blood, detailing the gruesome details of the murders that had sent shockwaves through the community. Each account was more chilling than the last, and with every word, Thomas felt the weight of the city's fear pressing down on him. The Ripper was not just a killer. He was a symbol of the darkness that lay beneath the surface of society, a darkness that Thomas could no longer ignore. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desperate need for justice, Thomas ventured into the heart of Whitechapel, where whispers of the Ripper danced on the lips of every passerby. The streets were alive with rumors and speculation, each person convinced they knew who the Ripper was. But Thomas understood that the truth was often hidden beneath layers of deception, and he was determined to peel back those layers, no matter where they led him. With each step he took, the fog thickened, wrapping around him like a suffocating embrace. As he approached the site of the latest murder, he could feel the weight of history pressing upon him, a reminder that countless lives had been shattered in these very streets. The night was silent, but the echoes of the past reverberated in his mind, urging him onward. Little did Thomas know that the truth he sought would lead him down a path fraught with danger, testing his resolve and challenging everything he thought he knew about the world and himself. The identity of Jack the Ripper was waiting to be uncovered, but would demand a price he could never have anticipated. Chapter 1. The first clue. The morning sun struggled to break through the haze of fog that clung to the buildings like a shroud. Thomas returned to the office, clutching a bundle of fresh reports. The morning edition of the East End Observer had just hit the stands, and the headline screamed of horror. A woman's body had been discovered in Bucks Row, mutilated beyond recognition. Marian Nichols. The name rang in his ears. As he read through the accounts, his mind raced. What had driven someone to commit such heinous acts? He needed to know more, not just about the victims, but about the life they led, the despair that had led them to the streets of Whitechapel. Determined, he ventured to the local tavern where many of the residents gathered. The 10 Bells was a dimly lit establishment, filled with the scent of stale beer and the murmur of anxious conversations. He approached the bar, where a grizzled old man nursed a pint. "Have you heard about the murder?" Thomas asked, leaning in closer. "I... Everyone's talking about it," the man replied, his voice thick with a Cockney accent. "They say it's the work of the Ripper. He's a ghost. That one slips through the night like a shadow. Do you know anything about the victim?" Thomas pressed, eager for details. "Mary Ann, they called her. A sad case. She was lived hard, like most of us. The streets don't care for women like her," the old man said, shaking his head. "But there's talk of a man seen with her before it happened." "Who?" Thomas asked, his heart pounding. "Just some bloke, they say. Dressed nice, too nice for this lot. Might have been a gentleman or just a clever one playing at being one," the man mused, his eyes narrowing. "You be careful, lad. The Ripper ain't just a story." With that cryptic warning, Thomas left the tavern, his mind racing. He had a lead, and he needed to follow it. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing a world filled with shadows, and he was determined to uncover the truth lurking within them. Chapter 2: Shadows and Suspects. The following day, Thomas stood at the site of Mary and Nichols' murder, his heart heavy with the weight of what had occurred. The alley was narrow, and the brick wall seemed to close in on him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was where horror had unfolded, and he needed to understand it. He examined the ground, noting the stains that had seeped into the cobblestones. The police had cordoned off the area, but Thomas pushed through, determined to gather any details that might help him in his quest. He found a scrap of cloth caught on a jagged stone. It was a dark fabric, possibly from a coat. "Oi, you can't be here," a constable shouted, rushing toward him. Thomas turned to face the officer, forcing a calm expression. "I'm a journalist. I'm just gathering information." "Not for long, you ain't. Move along," the constable barked. As he stepped back, Thomas overheard a nearby conversation between two women, their voices low but urgent. "Did you hear? They say he has an accomplice," one whispered. "An accomplice? How could anyone help that monster?" the other replied, her voice trembling. Thomas's ears perked up. An accomplice? This was new information that could shift the narrative entirely. As he departed the scene, he was determined to find out more about this supposed accomplice. He decided to visit the local lodging houses, where many of the women like Marion stayed. They could provide crucial insights, perhaps even information about the man seen with her. Chapter 3: A Dangerous Encounter. The lodging house was a dimly lit place, filled with the sounds of whispered conversations and the clatter of dishes. Thomas approached the landlady, a stout woman with a wary expression. "I'm looking for information about Mary and Nichols," he said, trying to sound respectful. "Any details about her life, her acquaintances?" The woman eyed him suspiciously, but relented. She was in and out like the rest, but she had a friend, a girl named Polly. "You might want to speak to her." "Where can I find her?" Thomas asked eagerly. "Try the 10 Bells or the market on Whitechapel Road. She's usually about," the landlady replied, her tone softer now. Thanking her, Thomas made his way to the market, where the hustle and bustle of vendors filled the air. As he wandered through the stalls, he spotted a young woman with a worn face and tired eyes. It was Polly, and she was haggling over vegetables. "Polly," he called out, approaching her. "Can I have a word?" She turned to him, her expression wary. "Who wants to know?" "I'm a journalist. I'm investigating the murder of Mary and Nichols. I'd like to hear about her." Polly's face fell. "You do better to leave it alone. It's not a pretty story." "I understand, but I need to know if there was someone with her that night," Thomas said gently. Polly hesitated, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "There was a man, a gentleman, they say. He was seen with her before it happened. He wasn't from around here, I don't think. Too well dressed." "Did you see him?" Thomas pressed. "Just once, from a distance. But he had a strange look about him, like he didn't belong," Polly replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard whispers that he might be a doctor or something similar." "Thank you, Polly. You've been very helpful," Thomas said, trying to hide his excitement. As he turned to leave, Polly grabbed his arm. "Be careful. Sir the Ripper is no ordinary man. He's clever and dangerous. Don't get too close." Thomas nodded, the weight of her warning settling over him. He had a lead, but he also had a growing sense of foreboding. Chapter 4. The Doctor's Shadow. The next morning, Thomas sought out the local medical establishments. If the man Polly had seen was indeed a doctor, he might be known in the area. He visited the nearby hospital, where he found a young nurse who seemed willing to talk. "Have you heard any rumors about a doctor who frequents Whitechapel?" he inquired, watching her expression closely. "There are several," she replied, her brow furrowing in thought. "But there is one who's been acting rather strangely lately. Dr. John Smith. He's been on edge, and people are starting to talk." "Why is that?" Thomas asked, intrigued. "His patients have been disappearing. It's all very odd. He's been seen in places he shouldn't be," the nurse explained, glancing around nervously. "But don't take my word for it. The men in charge don't like gossip." Thomas thanked her and set off to locate Dr. Smith. He found a modest practice on the edge of Whitechapel, its sign creaking against the wind. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear the muffled sounds of conversation inside. He stepped in, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. A young woman sat in the waiting room, her eyes wide with fear. "Is Dr. Smith in?" Thomas asked the receptionist. "Yes, but he's busy," she replied curtly. "I need to speak with him," Thomas insisted. The receptionist huffed, but opened the door to the inner office. Thomas followed her inside. Dr. Smith looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but guarded. "I'm investigating the murders in Whitechapel. I've heard your name mentioned in connection with them," Thomas said, his tone steady. Dr. Smith's expression darkened. "I have nothing to say to the press. These rumors are damaging." "Rumors? Or the truth?" Thomas challenged, gathering his courage. "People are scared, and they're looking for answers. If you have nothing to hide, then why not help?" The doctor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Thomas felt a chill race down his spine. "I suggest you leave before you get caught up in something you don't understand." Before Thomas could respond, the doctor turned back to his desk, dismissing him. Feeling the tension in the room, he left, his mind racing with possibilities. Chapter 5. The search intensifies. Determined to uncover the truth, Thomas returned to the streets of Whitechapel, speaking to anyone who might have seen something or knew something. Each conversation painted a picture of community living in fear, and whispers of the Ripper grew louder. He returned to the 10 Bells, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. The regulars exchanged apprehensive glances as he entered. Thomas approached a group of men huddled in the corner. "Have you heard anything new?" he asked, trying to engage them. One man, with a grizzled beard, leaned forward. "They say he's been seen near the docks. A man with a coat, always lurking in the shadows." "Do you know what he looks like?" Thomas pressed. "Only that he's tall, with a hat pulled low. They say he has a scar on his cheek." The man replied, his voice low. A scar. That was a detail Thomas could use. He thanked the men and left the tavern, his thoughts racing. He decided to visit the docks, hoping to find someone who could identify this man. As he arrived, the air was thick with the sounds of ships creaking and men shouting. He approached a group of dock workers, asking them about any unusual sightings. Most shrugged him off, but one man, a burly fellow with a weathered face, stopped to listen. "I saw a man fitting that description a few nights ago," the dock worker said cautiously. "He was watching the women who walked by. Didn't seem right." "Where did you see him?" Thomas asked, his heart racing. "Near the old warehouse, just down the lane. But I wouldn't go there if I were you. It's not safe," the dock worker warned. "Thank you. I need to follow this lead," Thomas replied, determination hardening his resolve. Chapter 6. The Warehouse. As night fell, Thomas made his way to the old warehouse. The fog rolled back in, wrapping around him like a cloak. He approached the building cautiously, heart pounding. The shadows seemed to dance in the dim light, and every creak of the wooden floor sent shivers down his spine. He peered inside through a broken window and spotted a figure in the corner, hunched over a table. The light from a single flickering candle illuminated a face that sent a chill through him. It was Dr. John Smith. What was he doing here? Thomas felt a mix of fear and curiosity as he moved closer, trying to hear the conversation taking place inside. "You can't keep this up," a voice said, low and urgent. "People are starting to notice." "I know what I'm doing," Dr. Smith replied, his tone sharp. "I'm close, but I need more time." Thomas's breath caught in his throat. What was the doctor involved in? His mind raced with possibilities. But before he could gather his thoughts, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly ducked behind a stack of crates, heart pounding as he pressed himself against the cold wood. 2 men entered the warehouse, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Is it done?" one asked, his eyes darting around the dim space. "Almost, but we need to act before anyone gets too close," the doctor replied, his voice tinged with urgency. "What do you mean?" "You've left a trail. They're sniffing around," the other man warned. "Then we take care of it. No more mistakes," Dr. Smith snapped. "I will not be caught." Thomas felt a wave of nausea wash over him. This wasn't just about murder. This was about something darker, something far more sinister. He needed to get out of there and report this to the authorities. As he turned to leave, his foot caught on a loose board, and the creaking echoed through the warehouse. Panic surged through him as he froze, praying they hadn't heard. "Who's there?" Dr. Smith called out, his voice sharp and commanding. Thinking quickly, Thomas ducked behind the crates, holding his breath. He could hear the men moving, searching. He needed to escape. Chapter 7. A narrow escape, with his heart racing. Thomas carefully edged away from the crates and toward the back exit. Just as he reached the door, a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder, spinning him around. What do we have here? Dr. Smith's voice dripped with menace. Thomas struggled against the grip, adrenaline coursing through him. Let me go. I'm just a journalist. Journalist? Or a snoop? Dr. Smith hissed, his eyes narrowing. You've seen too much. You should have left well enough alone. Before he could react, Thomas pulled free, making a dash for the door. He burst through and sprinted into the night, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. The fog enveloped him, but he could hear the men shouting, their footsteps pounding against the cobblestones. He ran blindly through the streets, heart pounding in his chest, desperate to find refuge. He turned a corner sharply, ducking into an alleyway where he pressed himself against the wall, trying to catch his breath. The footsteps faded, and he dared to peek out. They were gone, but he knew he couldn't stay. He had to get this information to the police. But he also had to gather more evidence before he could make any claims against Dr. Smith. The next morning, Thomas met with a few trusted colleagues of the East End Observer. He shared what he had discovered. The atmosphere heavy with disbelief and concern. You must be careful, one journalist warned. If Dr. Smith is involved, he'll do anything to protect himself. I know, Thomas replied, determination hardening his resolve. But if he's behind these murders, we can't let him go unpunished. We need to gather more evidence. The group agreed to help, and they began to investigate further. They spoke to more witnesses, gathered rumors, and pieced together a timeline of events leading to the murders. Days turned into a blur of frantic activity, and soon they had enough leads to confront the authorities. With newfound courage, Thomas approached Inspector Frederick Aberline, a seasoned detective known for his tenacity. He laid out the evidence, detailing Dr. Smith's movements and the whispers of an accomplice. Are you suggesting a doctor is behind these killings? Aberline asked, skepticism etched on his face. I believe he is, but we need to act quickly. There's no time to waste, Thomas urged. Aberline studied him, weighing the evidence. If what you say is true, we'll need to move cautiously. We can't afford to scare him off. Chapter 8. The confrontation. Days passed, and the tension in Whitechapel continued to rise. Rumors of the Ripper spread like wildfire, and the citizens lived in a state of fear. Thomas and the inspector coordinated a plan to confront Dr. Smith at his practice. On a chilly evening, they gathered a small team of constables and approached the doctor's office. As they entered, the office was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. Dr. Smith, Aberline called out, stepping into the dim room. We need to speak with you. Dr. Smith looked up, feigning surprise. What is the meaning of this? We've received information implicating you in the recent murders, Aberline stated, his voice steady. Ridiculous, the doctor snapped, but his face betrayed a flicker of fear. Where were you the night of Mary and Nichols's murder? Thomas interjected, stepping closer. I was working late. I have patients to attend to, Dr. Smith replied, his voice rising. Yet your patients are disappearing, Thomas pressed. refusing to back down. The tension crackled in the air as Dr. Smith's facade began to crack. "You have no proof. This is slander. Then let's find the truth, shall we?" Aberline declared, motioning for the constables to search the office. As they began to rummage through the drawers and files, Thomas felt a surge of hope. They were close, closer than he had ever been. Suddenly, one of the constables called out, "Inspector, you need to see this." Aberline rushed over, and Thomas followed. In the corner of the office lay a hidden compartment, and inside were items that made Thomas's stomach churn, personal effects belonging to the victims. Dr. Smith's face turned ashen, and he took a step back, panic flooding his gaze. "You don't understand. I can explain." "Enough," Aberline shouted. "You're under arrest for the murders of Mary Ann Nichols and others." Chaos erupted as Dr. Smith lunged toward the door, but the constables quickly apprehended him, pinning him to the ground. Thomas felt a mix of triumph and dread. The truth had been uncovered, but it came at a cost. The darkness of the Ripper's legacy would linger long after this night. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. As the news of Dr. Smith's arrest spread like wildfire, the atmosphere in Whitechapel began to shift. The community, once shrouded in fear, started to hope for justice. Thomas stood outside the courthouse, reporters clamoring for details, each eager to share the story of the Ripper's downfall. But as the trial began, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Dr. Smith had been implicated, but what of the accomplice? Whispers of a larger conspiracy still lingered in the air, and Thomas knew he couldn't rest until the entire truth was revealed. Days turned into weeks, and the trial unfolded in a frenzy of media attention. Evidence was presented and witnesses testified, but the deeper connections remained elusive. Thomas continued to dig, interviewing former patients of Dr. Smith and those who had frequented the docks. One night, he received an anonymous letter slipped under his door, the handwriting hurried and frantic. It simply read, "The truth lies in the shadows. Follow the money." Intrigued, Thomas set off to investigate further. He learned of a network of individuals tied to Dr. Smith, men who had benefited from the chaos and despair in Whitechapel. It was a web of corruption that extended far beyond one man's madness. Chapter 11. The final reveal. With the help of a few allies, Thomas worked tirelessly to uncover evidence of this network, piecing together connections that led him to a powerful figure in London's underbelly, a man known only as a Baron. Thomas discovered that the Baron had orchestrated much of the chaos in Whitechapel, using desperate women like Mary and to fuel his own desires. He had ties to Dr. Smith, who had been his pawn in a larger game. Determined to expose the truth, Thomas gathered his evidence and approached Inspector Aberline once more, presenting his findings. "We have to take down the Baron. He's the one pulling the strings." Aberline listened intently, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on him. "If what you're saying is true, we need to act quickly. The Baron has powerful allies." With a plan in motion, Thomas and the police set a trap for the Baron, luring him into a confrontation that would expose his crimes. The night of the operation, Thomas felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. They gathered in a hidden location, waiting for the Baron to arrive. When he did, the tension in the air was palpable. "Thomas Gray," the Baron sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can stop me?" "We know everything, and your reign of terror ends tonight," Thomas declared, stepping forward. As the police moved in, chaos erupted. The Baron fought back, but he was quickly subdued, his empire of corruption crumbling. In the aftermath, as the Baron was taken into custody, Thomas felt a sense of closure. The identity of Jack the Ripper had been tied to a larger conspiracy, and the truth had finally come to light. Epilogue. A new dawn. Months later, Whitechapel began to heal. The community came together to support one another, determined to rise from the ashes of fear. Thomas continued his work as a journalist, but he had changed, hardened by the darkness he had witnessed, yet fueled by the hope that justice could prevail. As he walked the streets of Whitechapel, he felt a sense of peace. The fog still rolled in from the Thames, but now it felt different, less suffocating, more like a veil that had been lifted. In the distance, he could hear laughter echoing through the alleys, a sound that reminded him of the resilience of the human spirit. The Ripper was no longer just a name whispered in fear. He was a reminder of what could happen when darkness was allowed to thrive. And Thomas knew that as long as there were those willing to seek the truth, the light would continue to shine. With renewed purpose, he set off toward the horizon, ready to face whatever mysteries awaited him next.